Hey everyone, I'm Jillian, and this is the first time we're doing this. So put on your seatbelts and we're going to learn a little bit about contract law. I'm the president of Premier Plus Realty, and I'm joined by our lead broker of Premier Plus Realty, Jessica Loy. And so excited to have Brandon Carras and Justin Bailey from GDC and Titleplus. So Titleplus is Premier Plus Realty's partner title company, but it's backed by one of the largest law firms in South Florida, certainly in Naples, GDC. And Justin is an attorney there. And so we're super excited to have his insight and knowledge. And of course, Brandon holds down the fort with Titleplus, answering about 1 million questions a day from our agents and our customers. So we're really excited to have you. And what's the value in watching this? Well, we're going to talk about some pitfalls to avoid in contracts, things that agents need to be aware of when working with your sellers and your buyers. So let's get into it. When we were discussing the topic for the podcast a few minutes ago, the theme that kept coming up was HOA law. GDC is extremely well known for representing homeowners associations. So this is an area of law that they're just experts in. And Brandon, working with agents and sellers and buyers every day, sees all kinds of mistakes that are made in terms of the HOA laws and disclosures and requirements, both in the FAR contract and the NABOR. So Brandon, so I thought maybe you could start us off and talk about that.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Jillian. Excited to be here. Hopefully we can give you some sort of information to the agents that can help them. And one thing I would say is just when you're navigating a deal, know exactly what your client wants to use the home for or why they want the property. I see often that somebody will buy a property and then they figure out that part of the regulations that they're going to be subject to, the rules and regulations, won't allow that person to use that property in the way that they are intending to use it. Whether it's they have to live there for a year in order to be able to use it as a rental property. Well, the person's like, well, I was contemplating using that property, and the money that I'd be making from renting it to pay for, I'm not going to be able. So the people get all worked up, and you can see that there's these problems that they don't foresee initially. I think getting a good understanding of what that HOA allows, getting the documents to the client early enough, and trying to start the process for the application, because applications can involve a lot of things. I mean, they could review your criminal background, the applicant's criminal background. They can review even credit scores. So you want to make sure that one, your client can qualify, so you don't get their hopes up. Which is a tough conversation, but having upfront communication, making sure they start the process early, and understanding exactly what they're intending to use the property for, I think can help maybe alleviate some of the problems that could come up later on.
Justin, what do you think about that? Who delivers the docs to whom? I mean, what are the intricacies of these issues that Brandon's describing?
Yeah, as you know, for me, I get involved usually when the oh shoot moment happens and it's a little bit too late. And so, for realtors that are going into a transaction or going to list a house, to me, the biggest thing to live by is you've got to prepare to be prepared. And you have to know what you're going to list, why you're going to list it, how you're going to list it, what the nuances of listing are. That's critical to your HOA. And so if you're going to list an HOA property, you should know what the HOA docs say. You should have a current copy of HOA docs. You should have information on what the HOA dues are. You need to be upfront with that, because that'll prevent problems as the listing side later on, where they say, well, you didn't tell me it was $320 a month for these HOA dues. Now I can't do it. Financing is backed out. And so that's a critical part on one side. But on the other side, when you have what Brandon's mentioning, when you have a buyer and the buyer says, I want a short-term rental, I want an investment property, knowing those HOA docs ahead of time is going to be important to showing what property you show. You're not going to go show a place if they have a restriction on short-term rentals. You're not going to go show a place if they say you got to live there a year, or you're going to breach that subject with your client right away. You're also going to want to know those HOA dues, because you go into these transactions and everyone knows about the pre-qual letter. You got to have your pre-qual letter. Well, if you're pre-qualed at 350 and you make an offer at 350, what happened to those HOA dues? Who's going to cover those? 350 is the maximum payment amount that you're going to get to. And so think about these problems ahead of time, know these problems, know your buyer, get to know what they're going to be able to do, and plan accordingly. Because if you don't, you get to that oh shoot moment when someone backs out of the contract and your client's looking at you going, well, you screwed me over on this. You didn't tell me about this. I lost a sale. I don't get to close on this house. I lost my escrow deposit. I don't have money to throw away. And because of that, you end up with me. Someone ends up suing someone, or someone ends up fighting over the $5,000, $10,000. And a lot of that can be prevented by simply preparing, by doing what Brandon said. Look at the HOA docs. They're available. If you don't have them, ask for them. They can be gained. They're usually published. They're usually recorded. They're usually on an association website. You're able to get them. So make sure you understand what the market you're selling in and what those HOAs are there for, because that's a critical piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for agents who have been in the business a long time, who might think they know a neighborhood or know an area because of experience in that neighborhood or area, but they're not members of the HOA. And so they're not always familiar with all of the meeting minutes or covenants that have changed. So it's important to refresh your knowledge of the particular neighborhoods that you work in all the time. We see it all the time. Our agents are getting into trouble and frankly are an errors and omissions liability when they are just doing their business based on assumptions. So they need to be asking for the meeting minutes and making sure with every transaction they have the latest copy of those docs. What do you think, Jessica?
Oh yeah. As you guys are just sharing your feedback, I was in the back of my head, I'm thinking, how important it is as a real estate agent, because we're really in the very beginning working with our clients before, our attorneys get into the picture. But the partnership of having a really great attorney resource is so important. But also as a real estate agent you have to ask the right questions when you're initially introducing yourself to your client and starting that home search, because the more questions you ask, the more awareness you become of really what they're looking for or how to help set them up with that search criteria, and kind of setting expectations in the very beginning so it doesn't come to a shock to them halfway through the journey. And being so informed will help answer their questions, build that trust in your guys' relationship. And then it's really important to have this partnership with a great attorney. So that way, when your customers do have questions about those documents, they can get advice, as to the foundation or the good standing of the association, the budget, the reserves. There's a lot that's going on with regards to condominiums and a lot of changes happening. And so the more awareness the agent has to be able to point the customer in the right direction, the more that they'll be informed and can make those executive decisions beforehand instead of after the fact.
Yeah. Okay. So as a practical tip for our agents who are watching, we talk a lot about HOA doc delivery, and just on a basic level, sometimes our agents will say, "Oh, I've got the HOA docs. I'll just send them over. No big deal." So legally, whose responsibility is it to deliver those docs, and in what amount of time? And they've got to sign that they received them or accept them, or can you just break that down for us so that we can get a refresher on what agents should be doing and what they need to stay out of?
So I would say this. It's important to remember this. I feel like this is kind of like our slogan. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
At PPR.
At PPR. And so, the seller should be disclosing what. This is very important, especially lately, especially given all of these new special assessments. What that special assessments are looming in the distance. Mm-hmm. So they should be disclosing what kind of unforeseen fees right now, but will be there. That should be disclosed. I just had to deal with that yesterday. And so now that is now an obligation that I think that you, as an agent, if you're listing some sort of condo that has this looming special assessment, this should be very important that you are making sure that that whatever buyer comes is going to be made aware of whatever special assessment is coming. Also, having the seller should have up-to-date condo and HOA docs. So these things change pretty regularly. So you should make sure that there's going to be up-to-date and relevant HOA docs or condo docs, depending on where you're located. Also, as the buyer's agents should also be knowing and requesting. You should, if you're moving into a place, hey, look into, are there any special assessments coming? Can I get the documents? What are the most recent updated versions? I think that, in my opinion, both parties should be trying to get whatever's the most. It shouldn't just be falling, well, that was their obligation. No. I think it's the best practice to make sure it's both obligations of both people to try to figure out what is the most relevant information so that all parties can work in conjunction to ensure that everybody has a meeting of the minds of exactly what they're signing up for, exactly what they're entering into, and how to get the goal accomplished, which is sell home to person buys home exactly what they thought they were buying. So I think when all parties can work together to accomplish that, that's where you'll find the best results.
Yeah, it's so important, especially as a listing agent, to have that conversation with the seller and obtaining the condo documents, the homeowners association documents, especially because there's a lot for a listing agent to have to prepare where they're inputting this information. We find a lot of agents will copy data from previous MLS listing reports and use misinformation or old information, and it's not current and up to date. And, our goal is to facilitate this transaction to a closing. So if we can have the sellers, during that time of prepping for the listing to go live, ask the sellers to provide you that information. Certainly request it from them. It is their obligation to provide it, but the consensus is most of the time they don't have those hundreds of pages of documents just laying around. And we as the listing agents need to do our work to be able to find them from the right source, or in reaching out to our attorney partners that these are the right details as well, because it's all public record, right? Those documents are online. But essentially, we want to use that information because we have a requirement as a listing agent to provide those condo documents on behalf of our seller at time or prior to the buyer executing the contract. And a lot of people don't understand or realize the position they put the listing party in when they don't do that initially and they wait till after a contract's been executed. There is a 3-day rescission requirement that a purchaser has for condominiums, where they have the right to review those documents and can terminate the sales contract. And so if you're able to provide that at the time the offer is submitted, and before executing the full offer, you have that condo doc receipt form signed by the buyers. They're acknowledging that they received all 7 of those condo documents on that specific date. You now trigger that 3-day rescission period. Otherwise, afterwards, it's on them to sign it and send it back to you, and your seller is still obligated to move through and perform for the contract. So, take advantage of getting that in the very beginning and having that ready to provide to a buyer you might bring, to the transaction.
Jessica, one of the issues that we have seen are Brandon touched on this, are the special assessments coming up. Those aren't necessarily listed on all those 7 required documents. So is it like, what steps do the buyers need to take, or the seller is obligated to share? Because maybe, they're like me and they hardly ever go to their HOA meetings for their neighborhood. So they don't know that there's going to be a special assessment coming up, and they're not really sure, but the buyers are saying, hey, you should have known that I was going to get dinged with an assessment after closing. I don't know. I guess that question could be for Justin too. Like, what what's the obligation there? What's the liability?
Yeah, so I think that that's a good question, because a lot of the times we sort of look at an association and think this thing operates like Coca-Cola. There's a steady board. There's a steady shareholder document that goes out, and everyone has this information. And it's easy to make that assumption because that's how ordinary life works for things we interact with. And when we're dealing with these associations, we have to understand a couple of things. These associations are constantly fluid. They're volunteer positions. They constantly change. When they change, new board members come in and new decisions are made. Those decisions are reflected in meeting minutes. Now, they're available to our sellers. The seller, when we talk about duty, holds that duty. They have to know that information. They're charged with knowing it whether or not they were there. So they may not have actual knowledge, but they have constructive knowledge because they have access to those meeting minutes. And so if you're representing the seller in a transaction and they're in an HOA, you get them to reach out to the board president. The board president's going to have those meeting minutes. They're going to share them. They can send a simple email. They can send it to the secretary. There's going to be a list of those officers that are in office at the given time. And when you reach out to them, they're going to be able to give you meeting minutes. You're going to be able to see those. Now, if you go and say, okay, I want the last month's meeting minutes, you may miss something. So good practice really would be, we need in your email, you can simply ask, hey, can you send me the meeting minutes for the last 12 months? You're probably going to get 12 pieces of paper. It's not a cumbersome thing to look through. 12 sheets of paper. But in that email, if you're preparing right, you're going to ask, are there any new special assessments on the horizon? Are there any new development projects that were voted on but aren't going to initiate for a set period of time? Do we have capital improvement projects? Did we do a reserve study and we're going to need to fund that reserve? You can ask those questions ahead of time and perhaps build out a set of questions that you ask with every HOA. What's the reserve? Are there any assessments associated with it? What projects may be being done? Are we expecting assessments? But when we talk about duty in the legal sense, the duty rests on the seller to provide them. In a perfect world, everyone should work together to get it, but the duty is on the seller. The agent is as an agent of that seller, can be sued as well, and they get brought in, and no one wants that headache just because they didn't get the documents, or they were given the wrong documents, or they had old documents. When we talked about things change pretty quickly on an association, unfortunately they do, and some of that is those documents. And so you may have sold a house, and we're dealing with a situation where the house was sold in the community not that long ago. A new one comes up because they saw your sign, they heard about you from their friend that was sold their house, and you think, oh, this is going to be easy for them because I have the documents from a year ago. Well, a lot changes in a year. And to me, what I say is you got to look at an association like a baby. When you have a newborn there, they change every day. They change every week. They change every month. And you have to kind of treat an association like it's a newborn because it's going to be different every time you show up. And so ask the right questions to the board president, get a year of meeting minutes, go online, contact our office, contact Titleplus and say, hey, can you make sure we have the right documents? We're a resource that's there as part of using Titleplus. And so making those requests saves you a lot of trouble later on because, like I said, we're dealing with a situation right now where a house was sold not too long ago, same documents were provided, documents happen to be outdated, seller, buyer defaults, but then they go, oh, well, it's not on us. You defaulted first because you didn't give us the right documents. That just creates problems that you don't need to deal with simply because you could have sent an email. And so either the agent should do that or they should ask that their seller do that and the seller provide that to them. It may be better if they want to make it seamless and be more full service for them to just do it and reach out with their seller on an email. But they can contact the president. They can contact the secretary. They can contact the treasurer. All of those people are going to have vital information that you can easily pass on then to the buyer. So everyone's fully informed.
So are you saying that even if the seller has no knowledge of a special assessment or something that could materially affect the value of the property, they don't know just offhand, so they're not disclosing it, it's still their legal duty to ensure that all the information is delivered to the buyer within that 3-day period, or
Yeah,
and then they have 3 days to review it.
yeah,
Okay, so that's
knowledge and
that's
law.
huge. That's not on a checklist, right? That's not on some that's just something you have to know as a professional. That's a little frightening with in terms of errors and omissions, right?
It's very,
Know the contract.
yeah, and the way that the law has set it up is you have actual knowledge and you have constructive knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And the scary piece of this is that constructive knowledge. If it's out there in the public sphere, you're constructively on knowledge of it. And so, you know, that's a developing thing. I mean, the world of Google and tech has made a lot of constructive knowledge, something that you might not have been able to find unless you went to a archive, is now readily available on Google. And so there's always a question of what you could know, what you should know.
Yeah.
And when it comes to where you live, you're charged with knowing what's going on there, even if you don't. Trust me, I do not like talking to neighbors. I don't want to know what's going on in a community. I just want to go home and be home. And so I fall into that trap. But at the end of the day, I'm still, by living there, charged with knowing what's going on where I live.
Sure. I mean, and even with I know with some of the in Naples, the Vanderbilt Road extension, there's a lot of easements happening and eminent domain issues, things like that. So even if you're not in an HOA situation, I mean, how agents, our job is to know where the problems could be, where the landmines could be, and let our customers know that this could be an issue, and then direct them to the right resource in order to solve that problem and start problem solving. So how can agents, in terms of disclosure and all of these issues, really research and know what those pitfalls and roadblocks might be? That's kind of an open question for anybody that wants to.
Well, I can first start by sharing when working with sellers, the Florida Association of Realtors, as well as NABOR, has provided a lovely document called the Seller's Disclosure Statement. And they also have one specifically for condominiums and homeowners associations. So that way, those certain questions are already asked to be able to provide reserve information, details about the association, common elements, etc., and provide that disclosure statement to the buyers to review and execute prior to getting into a contract. So it's a very helpful form. It's not a requirement, of course, for the sellers to complete the form, but it is certainly a requirement for them to disclose any defects that materially affect the value or future value of the property. So our best practice tip whenever we get a question at the office as far as, well, should we disclose this? As the real estate side of things, disclose. I don't think we've come across a situation where over disclosing was bad, but there are certain times where things may have been remediated and the seller's concerned about maybe the buyer audience being reduced because of disclosing remediated information. And that's where having the attorneys in the picture helps to provide that advice to the sellers on what they should be telling their real estate agent, because we as real estate agents, the moment you are informed, it is our duty to disclose that information. So be careful hanging out at the community pools.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's when we talk about disclose and what you know, and for example, if it's going to take you 30 minutes, if it's from Wilson to Livingston is going to be 30 minutes. That's not a material impact to the property. The traffic's going to suck if you're out on Wilson Road. But when you talk about Wilson and Vanderbilt now, you're talking about the Vanderbilt extension and the homes there. A lot of the knowledge about that is now known because you can see it. It's visible. If you're buying a house next to the extension, there's issues. So what you can do if you're looking at an area where you're not sure, you can look into county minutes, and look into that. You can see what sort of development ideas are out there. They're public. Usually the media will cover them, but you should look into it and just say, all right, I'm in this area. I'm not familiar with this area. It's a new place. I don't know if what's going to happen out here. You could go look into the community minutes and to the county minutes and see if there's any projects that are on the horizon. You can pull very easily if you for existing easement lines. You can go on an assessor and you can pull up by the address, the house, and you can see the map of the house, and so you can see various easements. There's going to be utility easements, things like that exist. Generally speaking, everyone should be prepared for that. That's not a huge disclosure thing because it's a utility easement. It's right there on the front of the street. But if there's something that's out of the ordinary, you may be able to observe that on the map. So, there is some work that you could do, but at the end of the day, if there's a major encumbrance that's out there, you're going to get that. Your Titleplus is going to find it, and they're going to let you know about that encumbrance to property. And that may not be something you had the ability to find on your own ahead of time. So relying on Titleplus, asking Titleplus questions will help you get there. But I think Brandon can speak to finding those a little bit better because he deals with that more on a daily basis than I. So go ahead, Brandon.
I would just say also, I would like to piggyback off Jessica because I think Jessica's actually on a really important point. One that I probably see a little more often is just making sure that you do a proper disclosure. It's better. It's like the old saying, either pay now, you pay later. So you tried hiding something. We have all the systems in place to basically find it via inspection reports and other people that can come in, professionals that can assess the home. There's a strong chance it's going to be found. And if you said no, for instance, you put on your disclosure that there wasn't polybutylene pipes. Okay, we have somebody come in, we find out there's polybutylene pipes in the home. There's a liability attached to that. So now you're going to have to pay to fix these polybutylene pipes, more likely than not. And so, which can hold up a deal. Now, one, it could be a catastrophic situation, and we don't want that. Or two, now we got to it's just more work for everybody. Now there's got to be a drafting of an escrow holdback. We got to agree to both parts. It turns into just more work, unnecessary drama and stress. And you can tell your seller or the buyer that neither one of them are going to like the whole situation. It's going to create animosity. They're going to feel like someone's slighted. There's going to maybe be a distrust, or the client's going to look at the agent like, how'd you not help me with that? If you could just have upfront, transparent communication from the beginning, like I just keep trying to emphasize that point. I've noticed that those types of communications, although that sometimes they can be exhausting, especially if I know how much agents do. They're dealing with so many different people, talking and seeing so many different homes. To have a systemized structure, I think anytime you get in with a client, knowing that these are the questions I'm going to ask, this is how I'm going to address this, having a kind of a checklist to know that what are the legal liabilities and obligations that can come from that, I think will not only protect you, right, as an agent, it's going to protect your client, and it's going to help you do a good job. It's going to make you feel like you're actually servicing your client when you know that you help them avoid that landmine. And so I think Jessica, I think everything you said is awesome, because that's exactly, you see it, you have a broker. These are the things that I see from the consequences of people not doing them. So I agree. I think that having that upfront, disclosing more, I think that's better, and it will help to avoid the liability that could attach to that. So I think that's where I stand on that. So good stuff.
And I think that's something you have to communicate with your seller up front, because obviously we're big advocates of communicating your agency relationship with your customer, to know that we're transaction brokers and we don't have full fiduciary, and we are obligated to disclose every single thing you tell us that is legally required. So I think that's important. But I do think that, I don't want to speak ill of sellers, because they're all perfectly honest all the time. But the disclosure, the seller's disclosure, is not a requirement, and you will find that sellers don't tell you about certain things that they ought to disclose, and they're not going to tell you, or maybe they will tell you and then they're mad that you disclosed it. So I think in that initial conversation about your professional obligations and your relationship is to do exactly what Brandon just said, to say, hey, pay now or pay later. So why don't we just go ahead and get a pre-inspection done, and we'll figure out what's what's going on right now so that we can fill out this disclosure and just get all our ducks in a row. That way we can have a smooth and faster transaction, especially in season, or if the rates go down like they're predicted to in Q3-ish, we're going to have the multiple offer situation and the days on market are going to go down again. So doing that, what was the proper planning prevents piss poor performance. So part of that is having that conversation with your seller about disclosure, getting them to just sign that disclosure agreement, and that will guide you on the particular documents that you're going to need with the HOA. And one thing that I really appreciate about Titleplus is that if title is ordered immediately, Titleplus pulls reports right away. You guys don't wait until closer to closing in order to figure out what the issues are. So if there are any issues that could affect the closing date, liens, easements, whatever the case may be, you can tackle it right away. And that way you're not having, the onus isn't necessarily on you as an agent to be a researcher of county documents, which you should do that anyway, but now the responsibility lies with the title company, and we just appreciate that you guys take care of that stuff in advance.
Yeah, one thing I always find it's super helpful when having a great title partner, especially when you get under contract. A lot of agents don't understand the differences of permit findings and open permit findings versus title issues when it comes to the sales contract, and how open permits are technically considered an inspection item that certainly needs to be rectified prior to, because a lot of times we typically wait till the inspection period occurs to make sure the purchaser wants to move forward with the property before spending additional cost on some of these other items if they're not going to move forward with the home, like, binding a title insurance policy or homeowners insurance and things of that nature. But being able to have that great relationship and make contact with your preferred title company who's working with and has been designated on that transaction at least starts the ball rolling for them to do a preliminary search and find if there's any open permits, within the county system. So then that way you guys can work with the inspector that's coming out to validate and just kind of confirm some things that the county is sharing with us. So we can rectify or negotiate that in the beginning. And then, of course, they'll do their title search for any open liens or items of that nature to get prepared for closing. But having them on speed dial and having a great relationship it helps expedite and get that information sooner, so you're not having to waste time. Especially if the buyer isn't going to move forward with that property, you can, terminate the contract and move on to the next one.
If I may, there's another thing that popped in my head that I thought was super important, and I can't emphasize enough. We have rates being high right now, and some people are trying to get in the market. A certain price range for a home and what they can afford is paramount. They need to know how much they can spend to buy a home right now. One thing that Titleplus offers when you create an account with us is that you have the ability to run these fee calculating net sheets to know and kind of get an estimated closing cost. This is very important, especially, and we can help you with that too. If you call us, we can help you try to get an accurate number so you can help your buyer actually get into a home that they can afford. And so one thing I would keep in mind is, as an agent, you can, by using our software and working with us, you can look good to your buyers by being able to plug in the home, find the information, and kind of get them rough estimates. I think I've heard the line before, you look like you are the source of the source. You are the real estate professional. And I think that taking advantage of the softwares and the resources that a company like Titleplus has and PPR, I think is essential. I think it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. I do believe it is a sign of strength to try to lean on somebody else to help grow and to serve and be a leader. I think leaders ultimately are people who serve. And so if you want to be a leader in the industry, particularly real estate, I think it's trying to serve as much as possible, and that's reaching out and asking for help and trying to find the best way to give your client every advantage. And I do believe working with an attorney-led title company such as Titleplus, with the softwares and the company and the resources that we have, and the brokers at PPR. I mean, PPR brokers, and the way Jessica talks, she's basically a real estate attorney, leaning on these people, leaning on them, helping them, asking questions. I think is ultimately you'll see you're avoiding so many more oh no moments that really can cause so much stress and really bring down the joy which is serving in the real estate community.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback onto that, it's something that was brought up there. There's 2 points I want to make. First and foremost, while it may feel like it, because there's a lot that goes into it, there's a fight for homes, there's a fight for commissions. Real estate still isn't a lone wolf endeavor. You have people that support you. You have a broker, you have a team, so you rely on your team. And what's beautiful about what Premier Plus does and having Title Plus in there is it's a strategic partnership that gives you a wealth of diverse allies. You are the allied powers in a way. You have legal, you have title, you have brokers who have seen things, you have new realtors, you have older realtors. You've got a spectrum of people that can help you. That's why you're part of a group. And so never forget that you can go get help. You can ask questions, even though it may feel like it's a lone wolf endeavor in real estate. The other thing I wanted to bring up when Brandon mentioned, and Jessica touched on it briefly as well, but when Brandon mentioned look at pricing and what the person can afford, finance is a big deal when you're getting into a home. You're going to have your closing costs that generally roll into your loan, and that's going to impact your payment. But your payment's a lot more than principal and interest. You have insurance issues there as well. And so for the agent, you should look at, if there's going to be a mortgage and you're in a flood zone, you're going to have flood insurance plus wind insurance. There's a premium on that. And so sort of understanding where the home is located or the property is located is going to be important to talk to the buyer in particular about, look, this is, you have your qualification here, but when you build your qualification, look at these cost estimators that are available from Title Plus, because you can build in sort of what the closing is, but also start to look at insurance and know what sort of policies you're going to have. If you have an older house here in Florida, you're not going to get some carriers are not going to estimate it because your house is older. So know the age of the house, know the construction of the house. And so those are critical pieces, because those really do factor. That insurance really factors into what they may have. You can also get, just as one last thing on the service. Apologize, I thought I had 2 points. I had three. The last part was what you can get on a house if you're getting down the road to help as a service type thing, just as an added service. Something that I just didn't think of until I got into my house. You can ask for what the average utility bill is. That way your buyer also knows how much they might be expecting to pay in utilities. A lot of these things are budgeting constraints, and they may not want to buy a house that's at the top of their budget once they realize that the utilities are going to average $500, that they're going to have $350 in HOA dues, that they're going to have all these closing costs that add in there, and that insurance is going to be ridiculous. So a lot of those considerations, you have to understand that in this area, we've got a lot of transplants coming from areas where they don't have to have flood coverage. They don't have to have substantial wind coverage. And a lot of that plays into things down here to think about, and that's a critical service point. So I think those are all great points, but those are critical pieces to the contract as you're getting into them.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's about time to wrap up. So do you guys have any closing thoughts before we go?
I guess for me, I'll just take off on it. It's another prepare thing. Prepare for problems, prevent problems. Yes, you have a litigation side attorney here. You got an attorney that does the property, and it seems like, well, why tell us all the bad things? Well, the bad things are prepare for the problems, and you can prevent the problems. And so hopefully we've been able to give you some critical things to think about that can help you prepare when you're getting into a contract to prevent future problems that may arise. So hopefully it's been helpful. Episode 1, and hopefully it was smooth, and we'll be able to as we go along get you some good helpful information that'll serve you in your process of trying to help others.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Great. All right. Well, oh yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I would just say my number is next to my name on there that you can contact us at Titleplus. I love serving you guys. A lot of the agents at PPR, I've got the privilege to work with a lot of them already, and it's so much fun cultivating the relationship. And the more we grow together, most of them have my personal cell phone. I know how agents are. They work 365, 24/7. So to be able to have that and to call me and to work through things and just, hey, bounce an idea off me, I love that. So don't feel like you're burdening me. Feel free to take advantage of that. And we look forward to working with you on your next deal at Titleplus.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's so true. I mean, Titleplus won, I think, a top producer award for Old Republic, which is incredible. So the incredible growth of Titleplus has a lot to do with the support that's provided, and we're just so proud to partner with you guys, and it's been really amazing. And I think the thing to take away for those watching is that you don't have to have all the answers, but approaching a transaction like a problem solver and a critical thinker is super important, so that you look ahead and see where the pitfalls may lie, and then direct your customer to the right resource so they can make the best decision for themselves. And you have a team. You're not doing that alone. You have brokers. You have a legal team. We have all sorts of resources available to you, and we're here for you. It's what we do. It's what we enjoy doing. It's like solving a puzzle every day, and it's always interesting for us, all the crazy scenarios that you bring forward, and we're just looking forward to working with you in the future. So great episode 1. Thanks for watching, and tune in when we do it again next month.